Okay, in today's video, I wanted to start talking about time. In Marina Burik's work, she mentions time and space, and she refers to different philosophers like Hegel and Spinoza and their view of time and space. But she talks more about social time, and this is what I'm personally more interested because it has more tangible effects on us. Living in a material world, we all experience time, and the social time and the utilized time is what I'm going to talk more about today. So social time, I personally understand as the fact that our time is not just defined by the passage of linear time. It is defined by our social relations. It is defined by our relations to capital and our relations to the production. So when we are workers, wage laborers, then our time is going to depend vastly on capitalists. So not only do they steal our time when we work at a job, but also Marina Burik argues that in the modern virtualized form of capitalism, we also spend a lot of time utilizing it, not resting, not having free time, but utilizing the time. So she calls it utilized time, which means when you come back home from work stressed out, maybe you will chill a little on the couch, but you're also going to consume some kind of media or some kind of product. Maybe it's going to be video games, maybe it's going to be TikTok, maybe it's going to be a TV show or some other form of media or art or something that pretends to be art. And this is how your time is not going to belong to you. It's going to belong to these corporations, these businesses, these companies that are going to observe the metrics. And no, I'm not referencing them spying after you. What I'm talking about is that you yourself engage seemingly freely in all kinds of activities that later on may lead you to develop a certain worldview, or more accurately, fragments of a worldview that are going to later on lead to you participating back again in this pursuit of happiness, which is going to influence you to later on participate in the style creation, lifestyle creation type of activities where you will most likely consume and buy products and relate to people in false or fragmented collectives based off of those products. And this is going to continue perpetuating that cycle of you working a job you hate so that you can buy things that you don't need. No, I don't think this movie was a very clever critique of capitalism. Back in my day when I was young, it used to be a very edgy thing to enjoy this movie, but it's kind of mediocre, let's be honest. It's fine. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. It's fine. But this phrase, I think it actually is attributed to someone else, to some kind of an author and a thinker, but it really greatly displays our relation to time. Not only do we dedicate 8 to 10 to 12 hours of our day to the capitalists producing surplus value, we also then come back home and then utilize our time to appease the pleasure-making machine, the desire machine, the machine that creates us so that it can consume us back. So Marina Burik throughout this entire work refers to the person, the proletarian person, being doubly consumed. So we are consumed as our labor power at our workplace, but we are also in the process of consuming all the media, all the products that are created to simulate our desire, where as we consume it, we're also consumed by it, by this process, because later on it leads to our fragmentation. It leads to our inadequacy, even if indirectly so. So in such processes, we are doubly consumed. So this way, not only do we lose our humanity, but we also lose the means of becoming humans. So we lose out on our greater potential of becoming the free agents of a social man, and that leads us to the path of destruction, self-destruction and mutual destruction, because those false collectives oftentimes may end up with some kind of dangerous ideologies, or they will just be empty and lacking, and you are not going to be satisfied being a part of a fake or false community or a collective. So the fact that our time does not truly belong to us, not only at our workplace, but also at home, can only be combated with conscious decisions to not participate in certain types of activities, but we've got to remember some principles of harm reduction here, just because as a person who has been consumed regularly by corporations who are selling me incessant accessories and clothing items and makeup items, I know just how hard it is to resist those urges. Whatever the drug of choice is for you, be it video games, TikTok videos, TV shows, movies, whatever, this is not going to be very easy to give up, and I don't think it's necessary to give them up completely. But what you should be doing is what a lot of people who have been addicted to drugs also do, is that you have to control your dose, basically, and you have to do something else instead. So you have to come up with ideas and activities that you can do instead that will bring you some type of joy and fulfillment, because otherwise you're going to feel like you have been robbed of all happiness, you have been robbed of all pleasures in life, and it will most likely lead you to the path of relapse. So controlling the substance, whatever it may be, is going to be much easier to do in community with other people. So if you're able to find people who maybe are struggling with game addiction or shopping addiction or movie watching, movie series addiction, or any other support groups that are gathering in order to help each other start something new, start fresh, this is going to be a fine first step. Many people have criticized all kinds of 12-step programs, and I tend to agree with most of these criticisms. I don't think that total abstinence is the answer to most people's addictions. As a shopping addict myself, I know that I have to give myself a little bit of something every now and again. Otherwise, I'm going to be very miserable, unhelpful, angry, etc. So I'm dosing it, and I'm also finding people to whom I can safely talk about this and with whom I can do something else that's fun. So for example, board games, that's the thing that many people find respite in. So Dungeons and Dragons is something that many people really enjoy, and it really helps you build rapport with other people. It may help you create a true community, perhaps. I'm not exactly sure, but I am hearing a lot of positives from the Dungeons and Dragons communities. Also book clubs, as I famously promote, I'm participating in a few, and I am very happy that I get a chance to talk to people about some literature that I have been enjoying since I was a child. And I keep sharing book recommendations. You don't have to read nonfiction. You don't have to read something that's going to wreck your mind. You can read something pleasurable and enjoyable. You can read a bunch of fiction. You can read a lot of comforting fiction, something you've been reading as a child. Movie clubs, if you get together and watch a movie and discuss it, I think that's another great way of overcoming some of the addiction patterns. Going on walks, communing with nature, communing with animals, all of these things are out there, and most of them are very cheap or free, so they're pretty accessible to the vast majority of us. All kinds of exercise and the forms of moving your body will be helpful as well, and I've shared all of this over and over again here on my channel. But do remember that no matter how hard you try, all the odds are against all of us. We are not going to be able to fully restore our humanity. We're not going to be able to truly connect to the self if we are still living under capitalism. So as we engage in all of these activities that may help us be more focused, more helpful to ourselves and others, we need to remember that this is not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is not just to become better humans or to get rid ourselves of these fragments that are inhibiting our growth as individuals. We should remember that our primary goal is to organize with as many working class people as possible, so that then later on we can enact a change that's going to be necessary to change our material conditions. Because when your material conditions change, then your ideology is going to start changing as well. And by the way, just as I mentioned before, Marina Burik does refer to a lot of these authors that are oftentimes perceived as to be at odds with Marx. But as I see it, and as apparently Marina sees it too, this is the thought that's building off of itself. This is the thought that's building on the previous thought. It is adding, it's not necessarily transforming something. So all of these folks like Deleuze, Guattari, all of these folks whose names I cannot pronounce. Marina references them in her book, but she does not necessarily find them at odds with Marx. Is that they oftentimes would name the problem, the issue of the 20th century type of capitalism, but then they won't necessarily walk this entire path of seeing what the key contradiction was, and therefore not being able to truly see what the resolution of the contradiction is using the Hegelian and Marxist principle of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. But she still refers to a lot of them, and Adorno, just as I mentioned before. And I think this is an amazing example of integration and on how modern Marxists can act. And I think this is a great example of how modern Marxists can keep up with the times and keep up with the youth. You read all of these authors, you're not necessarily going to be led astray from Marxism or Marxism-Leninism. I think it's an amazing feature that she's added to her texts, all these references, and I'm having to add a ton more works to my reading list. But to recap today's video, so your time does not belong to you not only at your workplace, but also at home. You utilize much of your time to consume products that are non-capitalist, but ultimately are there to create a certain desire, a certain personality, so that later on you will consume more products and let yourself be consumed by this fragmentation process, and less of your time is going to actually belong to you. And the solution to it is to get back as much of the free time as you can. And free time is spending time with people who you care about, spending time doing activities you enjoy and that do not necessarily promote consumption of anything, spending time in nature, etc., etc. So doing things that are generally considered healthy, but I do personally recommend harm reduction instead of complete abstinence. So let me know what you think. Let's keep this conversation going. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Do take care of yourself and your community first. Subscribe to me on all the socials if you want to. Subscribe to my podcast as well. And I'll talk to you sometime later.